We're back in the smoke-filled room, and this is a special episode. We have very special guests with us this week because this is the first week that Springfield is back in session. So we're going to talk about the 2024 legislative session in Springfield, and I've got some great people here with me today to discuss this because there's a lot we've got to get into. First, I want to introduce Lou Sandoval. He's the new president and CEO of the Illinois Chamber of Commerce. Lou, you've got a long background in business and in civic leadership prior to joining the chamber very recently. We're glad to have you with us today.
Thank you, Colin. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Ed Sullivan, former state legislator, current lobbyist, and lifetime card-carrying member of the Swamp down in Springfield. Ed, what's going on, man?
Yep, card carrying. Good. Just got back from Springfield last night.
It's all right. You get the legislator plate, so it's worth the trade-off, right?
Yes, it is.
Philippe Melin, he's the Executive Director of the Citizens Against Lawsuit Abuse in Illinois. Got a unique perspective and some key issues that he wants to talk about. Philippe, glad to have you here with us today.
Happy to be here, Colin. Thank you.
We've got Fran Eaton. She is a key member of the government affairs team at the Technology and Manufacturing Association, or TMA, among a number of other hats that Fran has worn over the years. Fran, I'm glad you're with us today.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
And we have Rich Carter. He is Cor Strategies grassroots government affairs expert. Rich, glad you're here, man.
Always a pleasure, Colin.
All right, so before we get into topics, let's first lay the groundwork. Our viewers are pretty high level, so they probably already know this, but just to make sure people are aware, with the Illinois primaries on March 19th, there is highly unlikely to be anything of any real substance done between now and March 19th. Isn't that right, Rich?
Yeah, you're exactly right, Colin. I mean, they're only in session. I just checked the calendar. I think the House is only in session 12 days between now and March 19th, and the Senate's in session 14 days. And that's if they actually go into session. They canceled a bunch this week, right, Ed?
Canceled Thursday, and they're only in about 20 minutes each day.
So, I mean, I think the fact that, there are a lot of primaries in Illinois among the legislators, especially the Democrats, have a bunch of primaries. And, the leaders want to get those members home so they can campaign. And as a result, I don't see them doing much. I mean, you have the governor's State of the State his budget address on February 21st. So they'll show up for that. And but I don't see them getting anything done before then.
Yeah, but and the other thing is they just don't want to put any names on controversial legislation until after the primary is over, because you don't want to make a vulnerable legislator even more vulnerable. Ed, is that what you're hearing down in Springfield? Not much is going to happen. Everything's going to get packed into April and May.
Yeah, that's for sure. They're going to have to go down because they have bill introduction deadline. But of course, staff could do that for you, but they have to hopefully read all the bills and then get them introduced. But that's going to take place second weekend or first week in February, so they got to get rolling on that.
I like how optimistic you are that they're going to read the bills, but always the optimist.
They don't.
All right, so with that groundwork laid, we're going to be talking about things that we expect to happen or we think should be happening this session, but most of this is probably going to be April, May, or possibly into June if they don't get things done by the deadline in May. So with that groundwork laid, let's get into some of these topics. Lou, I want to start with you. I know 2023, there were some wins for business, but as usual in Illinois, there was a lot of losses, a lot of challenges brought up for businesses in 2023. I know the chamber and other organizations you work with have an ambitious agenda to make things better here in 2024. What can you tell people about what they can expect here in this next year that might make things better for businesses, for workers, for job seekers? I know you guys got some exciting things you're working on.
Yeah, it's interesting, dovetailing on what Rich and Ed said regarding this front half of the session. It's pretty quiet right now. We expect it to kind of amp up. Last year was kind of a challenging year for a lot of the pieces of legislature that came out. More importantly, we'll look at one particular one, Paid Leave Act, which, when you get into certain areas, if you're in the county of Cook, the state of Illinois, and the city of Chicago, you're under 3 different types of, structures, and it's very cumbersome for businesses. So I know, there's going to be some discussion around trying to synchronize those and, pick a lane, what you will say. It's very difficult for businesses. If the big businesses, the large corporations are having a challenge, deciphering sort of what rule they follow, then, you got to understand the mom and pop and the mid-cap shops are also going to have the same challenge. So that's the problem. The solution, I think, it's really starting to build a moat around business and educate legislators. The good thing is we have a lot of young legislators that are down in Springfield. I think what you're going to start to see out of the chamber is sort of leading on educating those legislators on, what business is like and, how the free enterprise system works. Because a lot of them have come right out of community activism or, working for nonprofits. So they've seen the redistribution of capital from government to nonprofits. What they don't understand is that if you kill the golden goose, i.e. the private sector, they're not gonna get that flow of capital. So the intent and the impact is going to be pretty egregious. So, we're really looking at legislation that's going to carve out moat areas around business, make it easier for them. We're working right now with the Secretary of State's office on this Corporate Transparency Act that is sort of a federal level piece that's going out, and it's no big deal for large companies that are reporting to the SEC and to maybe under FINRA, they're reporting to the FDIC on their interests. But for small and mom and pop shops, you gotta streamline that process for them. So, I think what we've seen out of the Secretary of State's office is they're all about trying to streamline that process. So the chamber is going to lead on that aspect alongside with them to help streamline that registration process. Because the intent is that it's to weed out bad actors. That the impact is that if you don't comply or you don't do it, there's some egregious penalties on the back end. So we want to make sure that the entire business community knows about it, that they do go to the Secretary of State's site, that they register. It's a real simple process. You do it once, and it's like your articles of organization. Every year, it's just a re-up, and it's that simple. So, you're going to see some things like that out of us. Then we're working on a lot of key legislation, issues with regards to, making sure technology is applied properly, that we don't restrict this forward-looking, this vision and agenda that the governor's taken on, early growth stage companies, which are very tech friendly. We want to make sure that we are able to leverage technology to be a force multiplier for workforce development and incorporation of workforce augmentation, and I think there's a lot of fear mongering that happens with tech, AI, et cetera. So for us, it's going to be more about, how can we work through those pieces of legislation to make it business friendly? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. Ed can probably speak to this just from the legislator perspective. People assume these people get into office and they're just they are experts. And I don't mean disrespect to you, Ed, or other legislators, but from my experience, most people get into the legislature. They want to make a difference, but they actually haven't been exposed to things like businesses or manufacturers. Fran and Rich, I know TMA does a lot of work bringing people into manufacturing plants, and most of the time, what they hear from those lawmakers is, "I didn't know this all went into it. I had no idea." Most people have never walked through a manufacturing plant, let alone worked in manufacturing. So, I think what you guys are doing, Lou, there to give the lawmakers that exposure to understand the other sort of half of that equation is really important and really powerful.
Right. No, we look forward to make some advances on that.
Have you guys seen that, Fran, from TMA's side, with people just getting exposure to the manufacturing industry?
Definitely. And they're surprised what actually is going on in their own districts. Behind these walls, they have no idea of what's going on. And it's really kind of exciting. They could be having something that's from outer space or that's going to outer space, and it's right there in their district. And when they come in and they hear and they see what's going on, they're excited about it and proud of what's going on in their district. And it's really interesting to me to especially in the mom and pop, if you want to say the small and mid-sized manufacturers, they have so much pride in what they do because it comes from their family, perhaps, or it could be an entrepreneur his first time out. And there's just such a great deal of pride in everything that they try to share. So you just hear passion in their voices. And I especially have enjoyed seeing their eyes open and really begin to engage. And indeed, they say as they walk out of the building, yeah, I have a face to put with that legislation that I'm voting on now.
Yeah.
Yeah, Collin, you see these new legislators full of energy and to some degree think they know everything. And quite frankly, they learn pretty quick. They figured out, they maybe say something that they didn't understand on the House floor, and so they tend to get corrected very quickly. And so it's a learning experience for sure. And I'm not denigrating anybody. It's the process that they must go through to learn about Springfield. But the one good thing that took place this week is the inaugural meeting of the Illinois Manufacturing Caucus just took place. So it's a new caucus, and so hopefully this will be enlightening for people that will join the caucus and learn about manufacturing.
Yeah, I mean, that comes on the heels. I know TMA has had their manufacturing caucus for 3 years now, and it's interesting. You've got the manufacturing caucus that was just started is by IMA, and they tend to be focused on the big manufacturers, the huge ones in the state, but it's the small and mid-sized ones that tend to get overlooked. And so TMA, I know 3 years ago, came up with the SAM caucus, you guys call it, right, Rich? Where it's those small and mid-sized manufacturers, making sure they have a voice in Springfield. And I know they've had a lot of bipartisan success and interest over the last few years as well.
Yes.
Yeah, they've really grown over the last couple of years. They started, I think we're up to they have about 50 members, don't they, Fran, across both the House and the Senate? And they're plugging along. They're putting together agendas to get started for this session. And we're really looking forward to seeing what they can do.
Yeah, I don't know. We're talking about possibly having a manufacturing focused episode in about a month. So hopefully we'll be talking more about the SAM caucus and what the state can do to support our manufacturers. Ed, I want to go back to you. This is a topic we've been hearing a lot about, and for all of us, we're all spread out throughout the state on this podcast. It's interesting because the migrant crisis really was a Chicago problem for such a long time, but it never was really just a Chicago problem. And now, as people are realizing that these buses are starting to drive out to the suburbs to drop migrants off, and these challenges are really spreading not just to Chicago, but to really the whole state, Springfield has had to wake up to the reality that they're going to have to do something here. So I'd imagine that at some point here in 2024, we're going to see some progress on funding for the migrant crisis. I know Pritzker's already spent a good amount of money here. Somehow that's going to have to get funded, but Harmon's not super excited about that idea. And the state faces a possible deficit. So the question is, where's that money going to come from? Ed, what are you hearing about on this?
Yeah, I mean, so this was a big week for this issue, quite frankly. There's three major things that took place. The first one was, as for funding, President Harmon came out and said, listen, we're not going to have a standalone migrant rescue plan, if you will. Within his caucus, and specifically within the Black caucus, within the Senate Democrat caucus, they've talked about, we've had issues for years, and they're right. We've had poverty and homelessness, or I guess we're calling them unhoused now. And that's a crisis in itself. And so a lot of people are seeing all this money, tune of $640 million from the state so far, going to new arrivals. And so the Senate Democrat president, rightfully in my thought frame, has said, well, we're going to tie the two together. And so that's the first thing that took place. We all know that, over 300,000 illegal immigrants came across the border. Governor Abbott has been sending these folks to other places. And in his mind, why should Texas go alone on dealing with this problem? And it's universally agreed that this is a federal problem. And don't get me wrong, everybody believes that this is a federal problem, and the Biden administration has failed miserably on it. And so we see busloads of people coming. Now, what has happened, and two things that have taken place, we know that there's ordinances, and all home rule communities are starting to make rules in regard to bus departures and arrivals, some of which it started in the city of Chicago, and because of the negative consequences of not having scheduled arrivals and certain penalties of up to $3,000 to $10,000, that these buses have started ending up in other places. Now, obviously, a policy that was done by the city of Chicago has had detrimental effects on the overall issue that I don't think anybody really wanted, but here we are. And so yesterday, two things happened. One, the bus company sued. The bus company sued in federal court, basically saying that there's certain supremacy clauses within the U.S. Constitution that are being violated by these ordinances. And so we're going to see that play out. And what I see second to that has taken place, the House Democrats have put together what they're calling a new arrivals working group. So this new arrivals working group will tackle the issue. And specifically, they're tasked with potential state legislation and funding. And so, as you just said, there's going to be a working group that's going to work on this, chaired by Jennifer Gong Gersowitz. She is a very capable legislator, highly intelligent. I didn't realize that she has 20 years experience in the law, in immigration. And so she's probably the perfect person to put this forward. But it's a huge issue that they're going to have to tackle. And I think that's in response to what they knew was a lawsuit coming from the bus companies, and really a hodgepodge of ordinances, local rules dealing with this issue. And so we'll see how that plays out as we go forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be one of the hot topics in Springfield. It needs to be. I mean, the challenge has been that, this has been a Chicago problem, and everyone agrees, whether you're left or right, everyone agrees Chicago's not done a great job of managing this crisis. And Pritzker, for a long time tried to stay out of it. He didn't really want this to drag him down politically. I understand that because this is going to be a hot potato. But at this point, Pritzker's had to weigh in. Now the state's going to have to weigh in. This is too big of a crisis to just blame this on Chicago. I mean, this is touching, multiple counties now. And just last week, we heard from people who were saying that, they were dealing with challenges in central Illinois and southern Illinois related to this. So, this migrant crisis is not just a Chicago problem anymore, for sure.
Yeah,
No,
Colin,
I mean, so, well, just to add, I mean, we know right now that the budget is going to be very difficult to come up with this year and fund because of the lack of revenue that's going to see a downturn. They're talking about a deficit next year. And so you add the migrant crisis and all the needs there, that is going to drive the discussion almost exclusively. So the two are tied together.
Yeah.
Sorry, Luke.
Yeah, no, Ed, I think you're spot on. And I think the other aspect that I think is not being addressed is it's time to lead. I mean, it is a federal issue, but locally we're seeing the impact. And, I think a lot of the pearl clutching that's going on is from a lot of people that said, hey, you know what, it's been out of sight, out of mind for the longest time. So call it political football or what. People are getting a taste of what Texas has been going through for the longest darn time. I mean, you imagine a city like McAllen dealing with this, much less a city like Chicago. If Chicago's crumbling, how does McAllen, Texas handle this, which is a lot less resources. So, and it isn't just now, it's been going on for decades, but to the point that I think it's good to see some of the work that's being done on both sides of the aisle now, primarily to kind of lead on this, because I think the state needs to step in and say, all right, Chicago, you don't have your act together. You're just wallowing in place. This is a humanitarian crisis, and Chicago's already seen, the death of a 5-year-old, the subhuman conditions in that facility that's over on Halstead on the south side of Chicago. And I mean, that's just subhuman. And I don't care whether your name's Sullivan, Fahey, or whether your name is McCarty, your ancestors probably got processed through Ellis Island at some point. We had a process that worked in processing people that came to our country. We've stepped away from that process. And right now, I don't think we're leveraging the best opportunity we can with some of these individuals. You talk to anybody that's a business owner, the biggest challenge they have is workforce. So are we inventorying the people that are coming through? Are they healthy? If they're not healthy, are they getting quarantined? Do they know what skill sets they bring? I mean, just saying, come, give us your tired, give us your poor, at that, you got to know specifically what's going on, because there's definitely, it becomes a business crisis as well. When you have a need for labor, and on the other side of the occasion, table, you have, people coming here and just, sitting around and freezing, why not put them to work? I mean, that's, it's an opportunity I see.
Yeah, I mean, and isn't that, I mean, that's the whole model. I mean, right of center, if you believe in the free market, that's what you believe in, the hand up, not the hand out kind of situation. Right. And let's give these people an opportunity to earn their keep, if you will, to provide for their families. And, I know, as you said, businesses all over are looking for that workforce. If government could come in instead of a handout, but maybe programs to help train these people and then give them that apprenticeship or that opportunity, you might see some great opportunities come out of that.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot to be done here, but this is definitely going to be a hot topic in Springfield. So we'll be keeping an eye on it. Thanks for that, Ed. Philippe, I know you've got an issue that Rich, this has been stuck in Rich's crawl for a very long time. So I'm sure Rich is going to want to jump in after you. But, this is, when we talk about BIPA reform, it just sort of petered out last year. There was really no movement on this in last year's session. We haven't heard a lot about it. We never heard about it during veto session in the fall. I haven't heard a lot about it going into the 2024 session. And yet there's over 1,000 businesses just in Chicagoland who are facing lawsuits because of this lack of BIPA reform. This is a huge deal for businesses all throughout the state of Illinois, and it's just not getting talked about. Could you fill us in on what's going on and what the need is here? You are muted, my friend.
Yeah, talk about one of those issues that's kind of the football that nobody wants to hold on to. BIPA is one of those things, and it's really becoming a huge problem. So let me just give you a little, 10,000-foot version on what BIPA is. It's the Illinois Biometric Information Privacy Act, and it was passed many years ago. Really, after it was passed, it had very little impact. It didn't really go anywhere. But the goal of the legislation is noble, I think. A lot of times employers or organizations will collect people's biometric information. What is biometric information? That could be your eye scan, could be your fingerprint. It's, could be some sort of DNA code. It's something that is tied to you. And the Illinois legislature wanted to have additional privacy protections over your biometric, because you can change your password, but you can't change your eye scan. And so it's really important that the government, I think the idea of this bill is noble, but intention is not always all that's, the end of the story. You can have great intentions, but you could write a really bad law. And this bill was one of the first in the nation written on biometric privacy, and it was written poorly. And it didn't become apparent that it was written poorly until some recent Supreme Court decisions that really dramatically, and I believe unnecessarily, expanded the scope of BIPA. And there was vigorous dissents. There was just a landmark case last year in the case of White Castle, where the Supreme Court of Illinois ruled that White Castle could be sued up to $17 billion. That's billion with a B. That's a lot of hamburgers.
Not just hamburgers, that's a lot of diarrhea too.
That's
Sliders.
the whole
Sliders.
thing, man. The whole thing. There's no way.
Maybe your go-to hangover cure, but you're going to regret it when you're hugging the porcelain later.
I mean, I like White Castle. I think the place is great. I hate to see it go away. And so what did White Castle, what was this heinous crime that White Castle did to subject themselves to exposure of $17 billion? Well, they use a technology that's pretty common across the world, across the United States. Even in Illinois, it's somewhat common, and it's fingerprint scanning for employees. So generally what a lot of employees across the world will do is, as an employee gets hired, they'll take their fingerprint scan. As they check into work, they'll scan their fingerprint to check in. Maybe they leave for lunch, they scan again, they scan back in. They might have 4 fingerprints.
Yeah, it's pretty common, as you said. Yeah,
pretty common. Yeah, and what the Supreme Court decisions said is that according to the rules of BIPA, an employer in that case has to give a privacy notification every single time the employee scans in and out of work on the fingerprint scan. And so employers like White Castle, who got caught up and were using this fingerprint scan and didn't understand the Supreme Court's interpretation of the law, were committing violations of BIPA and incurring $1,000 to $5,000 penalties for each instance that their employee checked in and out of work. So that's how you get.
It adds up fast. Yeah,
it adds up fast. It adds up fast.
But didn't the Supreme Court basically plead with the legislature and say, which is kind of uncommon for this to ever happen, say, guys, you need to fix this. This is a problem. Right. Which the Illinois Supreme Court is a fairly progressive court. So for them to say, guys, you got to fix this, I feel like that's pretty groundbreaking.
Yeah, Judge Roquefort, the newly elected Supreme Court justice, wrote a decision. I felt it was a bad decision, but she did say, listen, we can't imagine that they intended to do annihilative legislation for harmless statutory violations. And that is an important point on this BIPA, is the employees in White Castle, their privacy data wasn't compromised, it wasn't sold, it wasn't given out, it was secure the whole time. Their privacy was ever actually violated. It was just that they didn't get the privacy notice. So it's a statutory harmless violation. So anyway, so that's the background. We've been, my organization, Illinois CALA, Citizens Against Lawsuit Abuse, have been really active on this thing, and we've done some reports. I think we did a report a few months ago. There was 1,170, something like that, active BIPA lawsuits in the Chicago metro region alone. These are, I mean, you look at the defendants, like my favorite, not my, but I think the most poetic is the Santa's Village, and these guys are, I mean, they're suing Santa Claus is kind of how I kind of like to say it. But what was interesting to me on this is that when we searched the plaintiff firms on all of these lawsuits, 69% of the 1,150 or so lawsuits were from just 7 law firms. So really what we have going on here, and most of those law firms are from out of state. New Orleans, for some reason, is really into biometric privacy information, apparently. And so what we have is we have a cottage industry of kind of exploitive, predatory law firms suing Illinois employers, and people who are doing business. These are the people who are, employing your uncle and your aunt and driving our economy and supporting little leagues and all that sort of thing. Illinois businesses are being preyed upon by these predatory law firms who are cashing in, extracting massive settlements because of the Supreme Court's decision, and because we have an Illinois legislature that just simply won't take responsibility. And they're looking at this, and they get a lot of money from the Illinois Trial Lawyers Association, and they're looking at, in my opinion, the campaign contributions, and they're negligent to the impacts of the economy and to our small business people across the state. And it is having a major impact on businesses. We're doing a great event, I think, with Fran's membership, and I can't tell you how many people have reached out to us and said, this is the most ridiculous lawsuit I've ever had to face in my entire years of business. And it's causing us to think about whether or not we continue to do operations. So it's really,
that's the point, right? I mean, we talk about the ability to do business in the state, and the cost of doing business in Illinois is among the highest. And there's these kinds of things that really just are unnecessary, that even the Illinois Supreme Court has said, guys, fix this. This is why we hear Illinois is oftentimes a rough place to do business. It's because of stuff like this.
That's 100% right. Yeah. So one last thing, and we move on to the next subject if you want, Collin. But just if you're a small business person, or if you have a friend who's a small business person, one, be very careful if you're using any sort of biometric sort of technology. Make sure you talk to an attorney before you do that. And then two, if you've got a story, whether you want to share it anonymously or if you're willing to go public, we think that more stories that we have that we can go and take to legislators and help you talk to your legislators, like Fran was talking about earlier before, that helps these legislators understand that it is not just a game. They don't necessarily know anything about this stuff. So we need to educate them and create the pressure so that they understand that we can protect people's privacy and also not destroy Illinois businesses at the same time.
Let me jump in real quick. Oh, go ahead, Fran.
Well, I was just going to say, in visiting at least 2 of these companies that are involved in this lawsuit as small companies, they have said, they were shocked when their employees came to them and said, I got a phone call from an attorney that was looking to see whether or not I'd like to be a part of a lawsuit. So they literally are going through and around to contact the actual employees to file a complaint against their employer, even though they admit it's harmless. They haven't had any suffering at all. And when you hear that in a small business, like with 30 people, that creates such ruckus within that company, and the whole environment becomes very difficult to deal with. Who do you trust? What are we going to do? So all of those kinds of things just add up, and we have connected, Phil, to some of these people just because they feel helpless at this point, and they're being encouraged to settle out of court right now before the legislature addresses it. Because if they do, the attorneys are saying it could be worse after the legislature gets finished with this. So all of this is happening right under our noses, causing all of these costs to go up as the inflation goes up. Everything costs something. And when you have companies like this that are holding on for dear life, afraid they could lose their whole company over a suit like this, is quite traumatic. I'm sorry, Rich, thanks.
Yeah, I was going to reiterate that, Fran. The current situation, like Phil said, is, the legislation we're trying to get passed is simply to change it from per occurrence to per person, which would change everything. At this highest level right now, like Fran said, these companies that are facing lawsuits right now are getting encouraged to settle at such a high rate because it could be worse. But if we got that legislation passed, it would knock those potential penalties down very tremendously. And as a result, the settlements would be much less. And so that's why the longer this goes on, the better it is for the trial attorneys. And one more thing, Fran, you're talking about these employees getting calls. I was listening to the radio one day, just, my local FM station, and during the commercial break, lo and behold, here was an ad from a law firm, basically said, if you work for a company that either, takes your fingerprint scan or eye scan when you check in every day, please call us at 1-800 blah, blah, blah. You could be in line for lots of money. So they're even advertising it over the airwaves.
If you're a working, here's the thing, let's look at this from the other perspective. You're a working family and someone says, hey, with very little effort, I could get you some money. Like, how many people didn't sign up for the Facebook or the Google settlements to get your checks? Like, who's going to turn down free money in today's economy? Like, you don't blame the workers for saying, all right, I'll take some money. That's why, as Lou said earlier about needing leaders to step up, we need our leaders to step up here, because this is hurting the very people we need to be driving our state's economy at a time where we can't afford it.
Yeah, no, spot on, Collin. And the one positive out of last year was the exclusion for healthcare workers in the Mosby versus Ingalls. So that's, I guess, a glimmer of shiny light in an otherwise dark closet. But really, I mean, I know the chamber staff and our advocacy teams have been very involved with BIPA, and kind of working. We're on a task force to kind of, look at solutions to kind of, as Rich said, contain the damages. But it's similar to what you see on daytime TV. If you've taken XYZ product, call Joe Schlo and have make millions of dollars. It's truly the trial lawyers, the special interest groups have run away with this one totally.
Yeah. And they then they get those catchy those phone numbers stuck in your head, like 222-2222. Anybody who's in the Chicagoland area knows exactly what I'm talking about with that.
Exactly.
They're getting 30% of the settlement at least.
The Illinois legislature right now, I would say, is very friendly to entrepreneurs, as long as the entrepreneurs are a class action plaintiffs law firm. Other entrepreneurs could probably they're just not on the radar right now. But hopefully we're working to change that. So we'll just keep that.
Philip.
All right, let's go back to Fran here. Here's an issue that I've heard a ton about over the last couple of years, ever since sort of we've gone down this road, this path towards more renewable energy and a carbon-free future, and some big priorities from the governor and the legislature. One of the unfortunate side effects of that is rising costs when it comes to energy. And we're hearing a lot about that for businesses, especially, manufacturers, which is why I'm passing it to you first, Fran. Manufacturers, this is one of their top complaints, because they're among the largest energy users in the whole state. I can't remember the percentage off the top of my head. You might, or someone else might remember that, but they use a significant percentage of the energy usage in the state, just the manufacturing sector. But it's not just that. It's even for consumers, energy prices are going up. You've got big fights in the Senate right now about the confirmations for the ICC, because there's fights over service lines, and there's fights over energy costs, even for consumers. This is a big topic. And as we talk about inflation and rising costs for businesses and for workers and working families, energy is pretty much at the top of that list for many people. So, Fran, what are you hearing in terms of the struggle here with these sharp increases in energy costs for manufacturers?
It's two-sided. On one side, the positive side is a lot of our manufacturers are being enlisted to actually build and create some of these new batteries, the new systems of government of power. That's just a real plus, and it's a good thing. We need to develop ideas and not just think about it, but do it and have them work. Especially if you see a Tesla sitting out on the road right now, very cold and dead. There's a lot of work to be done on that. But on the other hand, of course, it makes sense. The manufacturers are telling us that second to salaries, their highest expense is power, energy, and they have absolutely no control over it. I mean, they're just, okay, what do we have coming up this week that we have to set aside to pay to keep the power on? A lot of people in their homes are facing the same type of thing. But with the challenges that we face, it is necessary. We have to have not only power to run our companies, but to haul the freight and to haul the objects that are made. That all runs everything up. And so the complaint about inflation, it's like it's a circle that is like self-defeating. At one point, though, when you're told we're not going to have a choice by 2050 on this. We're not going to have a choice. We're going to have a certain kind of power that we use. That's a sad thing to have happen, and the choice is minimal. So when we have people that are telling us, I'm nearby a manufacturer, and I look out and I see the cost of air conditioning, the cost of heating, the cost of just keeping things going. And one of the local manufacturers here is very concerned about blackouts. I mean, we could be in the middle of they have a coating process where they have to get the coating at a certain temperature, and then things are dipped into that. If there's a fluctuation in power whatsoever, they can ruin a whole batch, and it's out the window, and they have a loss. That means a big deal to a small manufacturer. And so every one of these challenges that they face, you can see it. I can identify it with as I don't know. I have no choice. What do I do? Turn the heat down to 55? I mean, that's the choice that you have. But at this point, that's the complaints that we're hearing. And I hate to complain because really, as I said, we have manufacturers that are benefiting from this change that's happening. At the same time, they're not sure if it's going to work. They really don't know, but they're just doing what their clients are asking them to do. So the challenges are great.
Yeah, so I think it's great you bring that up. It's not just cost, it's also reliability. And some of these markers need to be hit by 2030. That's just 6 years. And 2050 for being carbon free, that's 26 years away. That's not a long time when you figure some of these plants take a decade or more to get up on and get online. So there's some work that needs to be done here. But right now, the costs are really starting to increase. And I looked it up. Manufacturers use 1/3 of all energy that's used. So when you talk about increased energy costs, then yeah, it makes sense why manufacturers are going to bear that brunt. So this is an important issue for our job creators in the state.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to share on this? I saw some heads nod. It's okay if you don't, but just want to make sure.
Collin, I think it's an interesting situation because I think the deregulation of a lot of the utilities, you've now got this other side of the hill, we'll say, and the challenging part is that as they continue to squeeze the margins on behalf of the energy providers, whether it's gas or whether it's coal or whether it's electricity, it minimizes the ability to kind of put money inside and invest it in the infrastructure. So that's going to lead to more brownouts. So it's a self-perpetuating circle. So supply side's not being addressed. The capacity side's growing, because you're pivoting, and it's not, the supply side's not being addressed. That's one issue. The second issue, I think, is this complete swing of the pendulum. Like electrification in automobiles, and we saw this classically up in Chicago this past week. Weather gets frigid and you got a parking lot full of Teslas that can't charge, right? Well, it's like at no time did we ever look at, this whole, let's look at the science. Nobody's really looked at, hey, what's the intermediate? Do you go to hybrid? Do you put a hybrid mandate in place? And then you go the rest of the way, over a period of years. It's just, let's swing the pendulum all the way to the right. You get stuck with everybody over there. And I think you and I were talking about this earlier in the week. The thing that the UAW doesn't see is the disruptions coming to their business model. They think they're sitting heavy and hot on this victory that they just got with their contracts, but the disruptions coming to their distribution channel, they're going to go direct to consumer on the sales of automobiles, like Tesla is. They're going to follow the Tesla model. So that means the dealers are going to be impacted. And then on the manufacturing side, as they further employ automation and artificial intelligence to manufacture these automobiles, they're going to see the rest of the disruption in the manufacturing process. So I think that UAW is going to have 5 years or so of heyday, and then they're going to hit the wall and say, hey, you either upskill or you're out. Because as they make the move completely over to electric by 2030 or whatever the drop dead date is, that's when you're going to see the massive disruption to the industry. And I don't think they see that coming. It's like I say it, having been a kid that grew up in a Rust Belt community on the south side of Chicago, big labor never saw the disruption from Chinese steel until they shut the factories down. And then they were like, oh, geez, what do we do? 18,000 jobs. Well, you should have seen the disruption coming. That is, cheap Chinese labor and cheap Chinese steel was upsetting the market, and we were not competitive in U.S. labor or the U.S. steel market to stay competitive. Well, you're now seeing history repeat itself again in electrification. You'll see it again on the other side, and it's costing people jobs in the energy sector. Line workers that are putting a product in as they change these these qualification requirements, they stall projects on doing infrastructure changes. It means people have to get they have to basically lay their workers off, and so it's I think it's hitting a lot of different aspects. I don't see it getting better before it gets worse unless they come up with an intermediate solution.
But I think I'll sort of end the topic on this. If anyone wants to close us out on this, it would simply be a plea to lawmakers when you're passing bills to sit down with people from the industries that it will impact and actually have a discussion. When you talk about the need to be more to utilize more clean energy and to protect our environment, those are good goals to have. But when you pass a bill just based on what you're hearing from maybe the green sector of sort of the political space, without talking about the people who will brunt the costs of that, who will pay that, you're missing some of those key voices. And so, it's sitting down at the table and saying, okay, we want to have more electric vehicles, or we want to have more, renewable energy. But how do we get there? How do we just come together with a collaborative process instead of just saying, hey, listen, Sierra Club wants X, so we passed it. This is the law now, and everyone else just sort of scramble to keep up. There's a challenge where is it even feasible? I mean, people are talking now about, are those deadlines of CG even remotely feasible? And even people that I know who are good friends on the progressive left are like, yeah, we're never going to come anywhere near those deadlines. They're even admitting it. So, it's a matter of, can we sit down? And I know we'll talk about this with another semi-controversial topic later in the agenda. Can we just sit down and be adults and talk about this? Because everybody has good goals they want to accomplish. It is possible to actually come up with, collaborative process that has this sort of come together, as leaders should, instead of just being, hey, listen, I'm gonna just push one political agenda through. We would be a heck of a lot better off as a state and as policymakers. But it seems like that's a challenge to make happen in Springfield. All right, let's jump to the next topic here, just to keep us moving. So a topic that I would imagine, based on how often I hear about it, is likely to be maybe one of the hottest topics in 2024 in Springfield that no one's even really thinking about right now, is independent and temporary workers. There was some action on this in 2023. I'm hearing all over that there's people talking about trying to move things in Springfield in 2024. This isn't something that gets a lot of play, but there are so many working families that are touched by these rules that are being put in place for independent and temporary workers. This is something that could have a massive impact on families and on the economy that really should get more eyeballs. Lou, I know it's something you guys are focused on at the chamber, so I want to start with you on just what you see here in this space.
Yeah, I know we've all heard the word gig tax, gig tax kind of bandied around, and I think that's where probably a lot of this kind of stems off from. But it's a little deeper than that. It's this approach that I think on two sides, that the worker is being taken advantage of. There's that mindset, that perception. But really, the people that are working in these, if you were to kind of do a random poll of the people that are working in gig, let's just say Uber drivers or Lyft drivers, they're retirees who you basically haven't, cost of living's gotten ahead of them, and they're having now go back and work. People that are, non-reported in the unemployed, we'll call it unregistered unemployed group. That's, just decided they're going to go off and do their own thing. And they're already kind of, they're making a very thin margin, working in some of these areas. So now to kind of impede or put additional restrictions upon them is going to make it even more egregious for them, and we've got, I won't steal our thunder, but we've got some secrets coming up on some studies that we did, in this area that we'll be kind of rolling out over the next few weeks. But the nice thing about it is that, the gig workers are kind of speaking up about it. They're like, hey, listen, please step back. We've got this, just let us make money. We're already dealing, with having to pay Uber and Lyft and some of these other, whether it's Grubhub and some of these other companies, we're having to pay them a bit, for the opportunity to work. But, it's just help, basically don't hurt us, help us, in particular. And I think, there's this dichotomy between intent and impact. The intention is good. I think they want to help the worker. The impact is egregious because in helping them, they're basically hurting them more. And so I think that's kind of where you're going to see, a lot of advocacy, happen in level setting and telling the stories of why people are in gig worker, economy, why they're in the gig worker economy. So you're going to see a lot from that. I'm curious to see what other members of the panel have to say.
Yeah, Fran, I want to go to you first, just because I know you've spent a good amount of time in your life as an independent contractor, so you understand this world pretty uniquely. Curious your thoughts.
Yes, I totally agree. And I always, my Reagan quote, I'm the government, I'm here to help you, stay away. I don't need that. I totally agree. As a journalist, I would just have clients say, would you write this story or could you do this or whatever? And so I was a gig worker when it was a gag worker, like 25 years ago, right? And have just completely, had a life of doing that. And then I see all of this stuff and I go into the panic mode because I don't want the government to help me. And we're doing okay. You're getting your taxes. I'm paying my due. I bow before you quarterly and all of that needs to be done. At the same time, I can choose how many different clients I want. I can choose if I want that job or not. I can choose to help. And that to me is such an exciting way to spend your life. My husband was an employee and he would gripe about that. And I'm an independent contractor. We work together. And so we had a taste of both sides of it in our family. And the experience, I just can't believe that this is even a thing because gig work is so big. I mean, 73 million gig workers in America, and all of a sudden we're going to be here to help you. We can go into the temporary worker aspect of it because I think that's the other part of this, which is you can't help yourself. We're not smart enough to help ourselves or to do what we need to do. So we have to have someone come in and tell us how we are, deficit in brains, so that we can't look out for ourselves. We have temporary workers, and I am concerned that people are being taken advantage of. But on the same side of it, don't people have the right to say, you know what, I don't like this. I want to be an employee. I think I deserve that. And when they come into that point and they learn skills, our manufacturers are big into temporary workers because they have sporadic projects that come in, and usually it's can be easily learned skills, things that assembly or something like that can be done. But there's a whole industry of providing for temporary workers that is being undermined by all of this as well. So every time this comes into play, it just gets more complicated, and all I see is more whatever's coming across my screen that I have to fill out to make sure that the state and the feds are happy. And to me, it's frustrating. Why would I, as an entrepreneur, ever want to continue? Why would I even start? Why would I even investigate all of the things that are there? Because we're going to see roadblock after roadblock. And that I think is discouraging, and why I think the frustration is there. And I agree with Mr. Sandoval. I really do think there needs to be a little bit of appreciation for what gig work has done. At the same time, understanding that, yes, some people may need help, but give them a break. They're smart enough to know if they don't like it, they go someplace else.
Yeah, I'll tell
Collin,
you that government should actually set a rule that I'm not allowed to take Uber rides, because I spend the whole time talking to the drivers, and they'll start by complaining about Uber or DoorDash or whoever they're driving for. And I'll explain to them all the government regulations that have created those problems. And by the time I get out of the car, they're like, oh, that's it. I'm going to make some calls. These government regulations are killing me and killing my business. So that if government doesn't want the Uber drivers to rally against them, they should just keep me out of the cars. Because by the time because they don't realize, they spend their time sort of hating on the company itself. They don't realize that most of those things that are passed down to them, those requirements coming from the company they work for, are not from the company. They're from different government regulations, whether they be state or federal. And the moment the workers realize that, it opens their eyes to a whole different reality.
We're getting double whammied with the state demands as well as the federal demands.
Well, triple actually, because we're talking about being near the city of Chicago. You got Chicago demands as well. So if you're in the city of Chicago, there's triple demands. Ed, what were you going to say?
On the taxation side of this is, you got the IRS that's now bringing 80,000 new employees to research the people making the lowest amount of money. I look at it as the government, going into their couch and looking for loose change. But that's what's going on here. They're going after the little guy, and it's amazing to watch. And they just don't have an understanding that they really are hurting the entrepreneurs, the guys that are just starting out. And it should be criminal, but I don't know. I'll get off my
Yeah,
soapbox.
and you talk about wanting to help working families. I mean, somebody who's willing to get off the couch and go work, whether it's a side gig or some of them make it a full-time gig.
Yeah.
I mean, these are hardworking people, and the Midwest, we're supposed to celebrate the hardworking nature we have here. It's what sets our workforce apart from the rest of the country. Let's not jeopardize that. Let's not penalize hard work. Rich, I know you had a bunch of things here.
Yeah, so I just did a little research and talked to some independent contractors on this, and it's really eye-opening what this federal rule from the Department of Labor is looking to do. It was just filed on January 9th, and I think it's going to take some comments, but they're looking to put this into effect on March 13th. And what it's going to do, it's going to set up like a 6-pronged test where independent contractors have to basically prove that they're classified as an independent contractor. And it's really vague. And, like I said, the one I talked to is just really scared and doesn't know how he's going to be able to do this. And the backside of it is, if they're unable to classify themselves, the government is also threatening businesses that if you hire someone who can't classify themselves, we're going to sue you. So guess what's going to happen? No one's going to get hired. So you're going to have this whole group of independent contractors, gig workers out there now that aren't going to be able to reclassify, and suddenly they're not going to have work.
Well, and we live in the state of Illinois. Let's be honest. If you live in this state, they don't believe independent. When it comes to tax time, they don't believe independent contractors exist. Everyone's a W-2, and you got to pay taxes as if they're a W-2. So in a state like this, I mean, again, they're just going to try to make sure there's as few independent contractors as possible because they make more money on W-2 employees than they do on independent contractors.
Yeah, true. But there is a little bit of hope. There was a lawsuit filed yesterday by a group called Fight for Freelancers, and they filed a lawsuit against the federal rule. I also know in Congress, there's a Congressman, Kevin Kiley, who's trying to use the Congressional Review Act to formally object to the rules. So people are fighting back. Whether they're going to be successful, I don't know. March 11th is only a couple of months away. So.
And I heard the same group that's been pushing making that rule happen, have been trying to make inroads in this state as well, trying to push it at the state level, right?
Exactly. And actually something similar to the federal rule happened in California about 4 years ago. And the result was the loss of 70,000 independent truckers who can no longer operate in California. And if you recall, that's right about the same time that we were experiencing all the supply chain shortages on the West Coast. And you wonder if that had something to do with the inability to truck all that stuff across the country.
Well, and I know they're talking about bringing a similar rule to this state, right? It's that's what people are nervous about, that the session in 24, they might try to push something like that here. And it didn't work in California. And there's concerns that it will have equally as bad impacts in this state, because one of the few things that we have going for us in our economy right now is being the distribution hub of America, being at the heartland and having, the access to waterways and railroads and air cargo. We are sort of that one of the areas that we do very well in this economy is in distribution. And you talk about independent contractors, independent truckers. I mean, this is going to hit them, and that's going to be problematic for our supply chain and our economy.
It undermines the union power numbers, and that is a key aspect of that, in my opinion. That if you have an independent contractor, they're not like a yellow freight went under, so a lot of those jobs were taken by. They just went out and got trucks on their own. Well, they're not union members anymore, and that's a difficult spot there. So that's another aspect of it.
A lot of sticky wickets here. Definitely a lot to keep an eye on, which is why I'm saying this is not an area that's been getting a ton of attention, but I'd imagine by the end of May, this is something a lot of people are going to be talking about, because it just seems like every time I turn around, somebody's talking about something in this space. So I really anticipate this is going to be one of the hot topics down in Springfield. All right, you see that Philippe has changed his background there. It's timely because we're going to talk about the judicial hellhole that is Illinois. It's a term that's not a one we really want to have earned, but apparently we've now reached the #2 judicial hellhole spot in the whole country as a state. So Phil, going over to you, just a question on what is that? Why are we the #2 judicial hellhole? And what's the impact does that have on businesses and on workers? And is there anything that can be done about that?
Yes. It's actually Cook County is #2 judicial hellhole. They do it by county. Some outfit called American Tort Foundation has been doing this for several years, and it's a nice way to to sort of track over time how we're doing, if we're getting better, getting worse. And for many years, Cook County was kind of stuck at the 5th biggest, most significant judicial hellhole in the country. But in large part because of the BIPA that we talked about before, it's actually moved up in the rankings this year. And so this notorious designation is, I think, it really is a mark for our legislators and the people who are making policy in our state. And it just kind of goes back to the theme that they're not taking into consideration all the competing interests, and they just seem to have a hostility towards entrepreneurs and to employers and to the people who are kind of like the golden goose of our economy. And they seem to be making almost always siding with an organization called the Illinois Trial Lawyers Association. And we've done some reports where we've seen that, like, you can just kind of see when the trial lawyers are going to be introducing some sort of bill or pushing some sort of agenda, because all of a sudden the campaign contributions start tracking in massive amounts into the appropriate committees. And then the legislators almost always seem to dutifully follow along. And so I think what we have is a situation of corruption, looting the economy, the Illinois economy. And there's just, and it's not only at the legislative side, it's also at the judicial side. Cook County, I don't know if anybody has heard stories about what it's like to try a civil case in Cook County.
Stories, and I've experienced it with my business being in Cook County.
Yeah, it is absolutely atrocious what's going on in the court systems, and there's just no discipline or anything, and very low quality. A lot of great judges, but many judges who just are in over their heads. And Illinois has had 13 since 2022. They've had 13 lawsuits of 10.5 judgments of $10.5 million or more. These are catastrophic nuclear verdicts. And it's not just these verdicts, but when you as a judicial system tell the world that we're not going to put any caps and there's no limits to how high the judgments can go, then that affects all the settlements and everything. And so it just runs in a complete drag on everything and is pushing it. So
and these lawyers know this, right? I mean, this is why Madison County was for so long such a bad judicial hellhole, because these lawyers know it. They know where to take a case to get the best possible judgment, to get the best money for their clients. And right now, Cook County is one of the best places in the whole country where if you're a lawyer and you want to make some money, come to Cook County, because you're going to get a favorable settlement or a favorable ruling. So it's problematic because that money comes from somewhere. That's what everyone seems to forget. It's like, it's not free money. It doesn't just get printed by the federal government. It comes out of something, and more often than not, it's coming out of businesses, and it's leading to closures. It's leading to increased costs for consumers. It's leading to fewer jobs for workers. I mean, there's problems throughout the economy because of it.
I think, this has been a little bit depressing if you're a pro-business person, but so one little thing, I think there's been a moderate decrease in asbestos litigations in Madison County. So we can hang our hat on that.
There's positivity. I know that they have seen a little bit of improvement in Madison County. So, well,
Madison and Clare are both, St. Clair are on the dishonorable mention counties, but they're not in the judicial hellholes list. So we're happy to see that. Southern Illinois is doing a little better. Yeah.
All right. Well, definitely something we'll continue to keep an ey on. Appreciate you shedding the light on that. And again, we're talking about areas that we need to see improvement. Because again, we're talking about, Pritzker has a big goal here to make this a state that's open for business, and he continues to, promote that fact. And we're talking about here some of the things that could be done to really make this a state that truly is open for business. And so the hope is in 2024 that maybe Pritzker and his administration and some of the legislators are willing to sit down with some of the experts like you guys and say, hey, you know what, let's talk about this. If we truly want to make Illinois open for business and one of the best states in the country to do business, which we could, because we have one of the best workforces in the whole country, here's some of the things we could do that would really actually allow us to truly be that pro-business state, that pro-worker state that we're looking to be.
Yeah.
Ed, let me jump this over to you. Not a business topic, but definitely a hot topic that we're going to be hearing about. So we got to talk about it. I'd imagine, based on everything we're hearing with the assault weapons ban being in federal court, with the registration, and there being questions and some recent progress on that, and what do people do about registering their guns? And then we're talking about new legislation that might come in 2024, like a suspension of a driver's license if you don't turn in your revoked FOID card. We're talking about gun seizures for orders of protection protection. I'd imagine it's Illinois, so there will likely be some gun topics in 2024. So 2 questions for you. What do you see happening? And then, something I've really been proud of from you and other people that I know that are in that space is you're really a desire to come to the table and say, hey, listen, we want to protect the rights of law-abiding gun owners while also keeping guns out of the hands of those who wish to do harm. Let's sit down together and let's solve this together. The problem is there tends to be crickets from the other side. You want to work together, but no one sits down and says, sure, let's do this together. So that's my second question, which is how do we bring everybody to the table to say, you know what, let's set aside political and partisan agendas and let's just work to solve this problem. Because, real people, humans are actually getting, shot or dying because of it. And
Sure.
maybe we should actually work together. And I know you've been promoting that. So let's talk about that for a bit.
Yeah, so there's a couple issues that have taken place in the last few years. The last large piece of legislation that was worked on together was the FOID modernization law that was signed in a couple years ago. And I think in general, it was a pretty good law. There was one aspect of it that there's a lot of the 2A groups that did not like, but you were looking at a situation where the state police, and more specifically the Firearms Services Bureau that handles FOID cards and CCLs and all that, we're not getting a constitutional right to a person within a year. It's supposed to be done within 30 days. And so we all came together and wrote this bill. I was part of that from the lobby side. What we have seen since then is a lot of modifications to that bill that have been done through rule. And so there's a little apprehension that, you go work with the state police or you go work with the party in charge that it changes. And so that's going to be difficult. There is one issue that's coming up that's dealing with domestic violence and should someone have a firearm within the red flag law. And that's a discussion which certainly people on the 2A side would be open to, because certainly anybody that's threatening their significant other or other people with a gun under a domestic situation, there should be penalties. And so I think what I have done is reached out to folks and say, hey, let's have this discussion. There is a federal court case that probably needs to take place first on this very issue. And so I'm hoping to slow it down and say, all right, more likely than not, the federal government's going to rule against the domestic violence person, and that probably should take place. And then let's work on the rules after that. So that's one area where potentially there could be some cohesion, some discussion about how we work together. In the last 2 days or this week, there's been a couple issues that have popped up. Obviously, we have the gun ban that took place a year ago. The rules in regard to how someone would go register a now banned firearm have been before JCAR, which is the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules. And so that hearing took place on Tuesday. And the rules, in essence, are going to go forward and they're going to be codified. There was one tweak at the end where the Republicans on JCAR asked for an objection. The objection was sustained. And so ISP, Illinois State Police, had to come back for them to be permanent. But what did come out of there is that you were supposed to register your firearm or your component or your 50 cal ammunition by January 1st. And yet the registration is still open. And so potentially if you now all of a sudden say, well, you know what, maybe I should register, and it's now January 18th. The problem is, while you can register that firearm, a local state's attorney could say, well, that's null and void because you did that after the statutory deadline written in the law. And so when we talk to 2A folks out there, you say, well, be careful, because state's attorney could say, well, I'd like a list of everybody from my county that has registered post January 1st, and then go say, I know you have a banned firearm because you registered it, and I don't adhere to the post January 1st registration, and then go charge him with a misdemeanor. So there's some concern that came out of JCAR on Tuesday in regard to that. There's a new bill that is an interesting bill, I guess is the best way for me to put it and be diplomatic. So there's a senator from Highland Park, Senator Morrison, that has filed a bill that basically says if a person has their FOID card revoked, and they do not turn in the physical FOID card to the state police or local sheriff or police, that the Secretary of State will revoke their driver's license. And so in essence, the hammer is you're now going to get your driver's license taken away. And I guess, they will say that if you just comply, then everything is fine. Well, two things. First, we find it ironic that this bill was filed on January 10th, which was the exact 1-year anniversary of the gun ban that took place. But more importantly, anybody that has dealt with the Firearms Services Bureau, specifically a year ago, it took over a year to even get anything through ISP. So now this very bill, where you could lose your driver's license and potentially your livelihood, is dependent on this very institution and databases that was a complete mockery. I mean, you couldn't get anything done, and you can't reach them. And so obviously a lot of concerns in the Second Amendment community on what's going to take place there, whether that goes through or not. You know, the trend in the General Assembly has been to go away from using your driver's license as a hammer to get you to do something, whether that's child support or paying parking tickets or things of that nature. And yet now they're gonna go after gun owners. So those it's been an interesting week. I've been dealing with that all week down in Springfield, but it's we'll see how it goes forward. You know, obviously when we work together, we get the good things done. And unfortunately, it seems like some of the things that have been taking place has undone some of the good work that has taken place. And so when you ask, are we going to work together? I hope. I certainly hope, but it's to be determined, I guess.
Yeah. Well, again, I think that there's this desire from those law-abiding gun owners in the state to say, hey, listen, yeah, we're with you. Let's stop those people who aren't abiding by the law. I've always seen that the people who are the most in favor of stopping those who want to break the law here are the ones who are abiding by the law as gun owners. So it is something that's not talked about enough in this state, that groups like some of the groups you work with and represent want to sit at the table and say, yeah, let's go. Let's solve these issues. But I think sometimes people want political points more than they want to actually solve problems, and that's a challenge.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you know, there was a bill that took place that was initially sponsored by former leader Durkin and Attorney General Ramaquo.
Ramaquo, I like that.
I'm having a rough time today. I still have a cold. And the bill basically gave a get-out-of-free jail to folks with first-time offenders of the FOID Act. And so from our perspective, we helped write and the bill was going to sunset, so we helped rewrite it to help folks that, you know, didn't do anything dangerous, weren't committing a crime. They just were caught with a firearm without a FOID card. And we certainly don't want to see people in prison for that. And this is one where the do-gooders of the world and the 2A community came together and wrote legislation, and it passed, signed into law. And I think it will help keep people out of jail and help keep people from, you know, getting a felony where they now, you know, their lives are ruined. And so that's a good thing that took place this last year. And hopefully we can build upon that.
Okay, good. Great to hear. All right, let's go to our last official topic here. Then we'll close down. We're right at about an hour here. Rich, I want to go over to you on this. Just something that I haven't heard a lot about, but we should be hearing more about. I know it's a big priority for a few organizations. I know the NFIB's talked about it a lot. The Farm Bureau's talked about it a lot, which is estate tax reform. People don't realize that in this state, the state exemption for the estate tax is actually a third of what it is for the federal exemption. And so what ends up happening is, you know, somebody passes away, they want to pass on to their descendants, you know, their properties, what they own, like their family farm. But with just a $4 million exemption, a lot of these family farms are valued at higher than that. And so you leave your descendants in a really tough spot of having to sell some of their farmland, some of their family farmland, just to pay the tax impact of their parents happening to die. There's a challenge here, and so there are groups that rightfully so are saying, hey, can we get this addressed? Can we reform this and just bring the state exemption in line with the federal exemption? Why are we a third of the federal's level? Heard a little bit about it in 23, but haven't heard enough about it, and certainly have heard very little about it for 2024. So Rich, what are you hearing about this, and is there going to be a push on this in this upcoming session?
Sure, Colin. By the way, we call it the death tax because it only comes into play whenever someone dies. And then, you know, it basically has the potential to take half of the estate, which is why it was a huge deal federally, you know, back 10 years ago. They made some significant reforms. And now there's basically the first $12.9 million of the estate is exempt from the tax at the federal level. But at the state level, it's only $4 million. So back last session, at the end of last session, the business groups were, you know, including the chamber, were talking about trying to get that exemption increased up to the federal limit. And in fact, there was some legislation introduced Senator Kaler out of Peoria, I think, has a bill that would do that. The reason you haven't heard a lot about it is because it costs money. And in order to increase that exemption, it's going to cost, I'm not sure exactly what the cost is. It's not hugely significant, but the problem is it's competing against other things. And end of the day, when, you know, next year
just to clarify, you're talking about cost to the state's budget, right?
Yeah, cost to the state's budget.
Reduced tax generation for the state, and that's never something that they're going to be super excited about.
Exactly. And the problem is, I think the reason you're not hearing about it is exactly what Ed said earlier. Next year, you know, the state's facing a $900 billion deficit.
No, million. You said it right the first time.
Sorry, $900 million deficit. And the problem is everything costs money. And when you have all these millions and millions of dollars of costs for migrants and other things that you want to do, in addition, there's the Democrats are pushing a $300 per child tax credit on the other side that's going to cost another $300 million. So it could get caught up in the whole, you know, do we give $300 million to the $300 tax credit to children, or, you know, this exemption for businesses? And unfortunately, you know, it's going to be very difficult, I think, to get it done, which is why we aren't hearing anything about it this year.
Well, I mean, it's interesting how until you face it yourself, sometimes you just don't care about issues, but things like the estate tax, the death tax, you don't care about it till suddenly you're going to face it. And then you realize how big of a problem it is. I mean, it's crazy to hear from the Farm Bureau, these family farms that have been in the family for generations, and they're having to sell off a third of their land just to pay the tax impact of their parents dying. You know, it's ridiculous. You know, my wife, we were watching Wheel of Fortune happened to be on, and somebody was going to win a car. And she was like, do you pay taxes on that? I was like, yeah. So you get this free car, but you pay 10 to 30%, depending on what state you're in taxes on that car you just won. So you got a free car, but you got to fork away a $10,000 to $15,000 check to walk away with your free car. Like, I think when people are exposed to the realities of the tax structure, they start to realize just some things that are ridiculous. And this is definitely one of those that's at the top of the list. But as you said, I just have not seen a lot of stomach down in Springfield to do something about this, even though it's common sense.
Yeah. You know, so Collin, there's been some movement. The Civic Committee of the Commercial Club of Chicago came out with a tax policy white paper, if you will, on various tax cuts that would take place. And it did get the eye of President Harmon, and he said, yeah, we probably should talk about getting rid of the estate tax. But there was a big but there. The but being that would be with overall tax reform, which is, you know, kind of speak for what else are we going to raise to give you the break in the other side. So while he says yes, that's certainly something that and how he framed it is people might not think that or might not worry about raising their taxes, but they do believe that keeping what you have is something that drives residency in the state of Illinois, that people will stay here if we have lower estate taxes. And I don't disagree with him. But until we figure out what his overall plan is, what he wants to raise to, in essence, make up the shortcomings of revenue for that, you know, I don't know whether there'll be overall tax policy, but at the very least, he's talking about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, one of the few areas of Illinois' tax policy that's actually favorable for our residents is that sort of 65 and older, the retirement, the tax levels for seniors, maybe not property taxes in general, but just overall with the income tax, retirement tax, and others. You know, Illinois actually does stack up pretty favorably compared to other states. It's one of the few areas we do stack up decently when it comes to taxation. So this estate tax, this death tax kind of feeds into that world where it might actually start to hurt us in one of the few areas we're okay in when it comes to tax policy. So I'm hopeful that people start to sort of connect those dots. All right, we are over our time, so let me close on a fun topic, and maybe not everybody wants to talk about this, but it's in the news. So my company, Cor Strategies, just did a poll talking about the Bears, and we pulled a couple things. And one of the things we asked people is where they wanted to see a potential new Bears stadium. Talking about Springfield, and so that's where the question comes up: is there going to be any conversations in 2024 about possibly helping the Bears with a new stadium? There was legislation in 2023; it kind of petered out. Now I know people are talking about what's going to happen in 2024. Our poll said that 48% of Illinois residents want the Bears to build their new stadium in Chicago. 29% say Arlington Heights, and the rest either had other ideas or didn't really care. So the sentiment has kind of changed, and now people want the Bears to stay in Chicago. But the question will be is how does this get funded? So Ed, I think I'll start with you and then go to anybody else who wants to talk about, maybe just talk about the Bears if you want. But you hearing anything, or is this just not going to go anywhere?
Yeah, well, you know what? Speaker Welsh was just quoted as saying that he has not talked to anyone or heard of any legislation that is going to be proposed in 2024. That's a direct quote. Well, I'm improvising the quote a little bit, but basically that's what he said. And so if you take that on its face, how can you think that you're going to get anything passed if you haven't talked to the speaker? And I served with Chris, the speaker, and he's sending a message there. If for him to say that publicly and really I have not seen anything to date, he's sending a message that if you better come to us and start talking or forget it. And so it's an uphill battle, and we'll see what happens. But I don't have an opinion one way or the other. If they want to build something on the south side more with the latest developments, potentially, I just think you have to have a domed stadium. To have a domed stadium allows you to do so many more things and actually make money. When Lucas Oil Stadium in Indiana was built, they have made so much money. They've almost recouped their investment over time because they can get the Final Four, they can get the NCAAs, they can get concerts. They're using it year round, and so I think it's short-sighted for government to say no, we're not going to fund this without looking at the ROI on what can take place with a domed stadium, and that's the shortcomings of. Really, it's the progressive side saying, no, we're not going to help a corporate entity. Well, you help a corporate entity on the global aspect of what does it bring to your economy? And that's really should be the focus.
Well, if you're willing to spend as much money as you are with Stellaris or Goshen or some of these others because it creates jobs, I don't know why this wouldn't be considered among that same type of sort of super project.
Agreed.
Yeah. Anybody else, maybe on the fun side, what do you think? Stick with Justin Fields or draft a quarterback? Anybody got an opinion on that? Lou, you're muted, Lou.
Chicago's the place where all good quarterbacks go to die. So I don't know about the quarterback thing. But on the topic of the stadium, though, I really do think that they got to look at other areas. I mean, I think we're leaving a gem that's right on the lakefront, the old USX property. I mean, they could easily put it there and put it and develop a complete, ecosystem around it. And it's going to bring a boon to the economy. Obviously, I'm bullish on that part of the town because that's where I grew up. But that's an area. I mean, to our other common topic, Collin, you saw the conversation around, the 78 with the White Sox.
Yep. I was just going to say, fellow White Sox fan.
Yeah, fellow White Sox fan, right? So that is, that's exciting. I mean, I'm a little sad because, we may lose them in Bridgeport, but but I think that's a nice area to kind of think about. How do you put them in an area where you can develop an ecosystem? You look at what they've done in
actually
Miami.
Have like a good. I mean, you saw the renderings of what the park would look like with this skyline in the background instead of just like industrial sites in the background.
It's beautiful. I mean, that's vision right there. And it's kind of plugging it in the middle of an area where they can really be an economic driver. So, same thing I think has to be said with the Bears. I think they got to look at that and say, hey, what other areas out of the usual suspects, Arlington Heights, lakefront, can you go down? And I mean, it's open land down on the Southworks property, it's just, I mean, you got plenty of room for parking lots. You got a lot of space, and now you just got to do a little infrastructure rebuild on 41, but that's it,
I think to your point, it's vision, right? I mean, it's having that larger vision, which, listen, Johnson takes a lot of flack, but the one thing he's not lacking is having, grand vision. So if there's going to be a mayor who might be able to get this done, again, Johnson lacks in a lot of areas, but this is one of the things he does pretty well. So maybe he does pull something off here.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well, let's close with this. I appreciate everybody's time. Anybody want to close with an air of positivity? Anything you think you want to bring up that just gives you optimism as we head into 2024 session? Just anything you want to say? Hey, listen, I want to point to X because it just really does give me hope for the future. Let's close with some positivity here.
Well, I think.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Rich. Go ahead.
I think what I'm most excited about is that they're only going to be in session a certain number of days because the least amount of time in session.
That's
That
a
makes
cheating
me
answer.
optimistic.
Go ahead, Lou.
I'm going to go to the monetary side. So I think what I'm looking forward to is some rate cuts to kind of bring the cost of capital down. Everybody I'm talking to is saying, minimum 4. Some are being a lot more bullish on it. They're saying we may see up to, 10 cuts, for a total of 2.5 basis points, maybe 3 basis points on interest. So, I think that's a positive because that'll get things moving a little bit, in terms of a lot of things and help to control some of the inflation. I mean, we got to get away from this goofy monetary policy we're trying to regulate. So, but I'm looking forward to that as a positivity. Yeah.
Nice. I mean, certainly people are a lot more positive about the economy going into this year than they were last year. So we're seeing that even in polls. I mean, we took a poll, Core Strategies, through our Empower to Win subscriber service. We've got a poll in there of how people feel about the economy, and the numbers are tremendously higher than we've seen for a very long time. People really are feeling optimistic.
To just take a little step into the partisan issue, 30 years ago, 1994, Illinois for 2 years had a majority in the House and a majority in the Senate of Republicans, a different side of it. It is possible to have a different angle in the state of Illinois, even though it only happens every 30 or more years, but it is possible to have a majority in both the House and the Senate in the state of Illinois. And I know redistricting has changed all of that, but I just kind of chuckled to myself thinking 1994, there were 2 years when there was following Newt Gingrich's contract on America. It was a goal that was set to change this nation. And it was a fun experience. I lived through it. You probably weren't born yet, but I did. And it was a fun time to get involved in politics at that time. So it can happen again.
Well, and even still, obviously people know me, I'm fairly partisan, but I know, Lou, you and I talked about how there are even some Democrats out there who are willing to have conversations about things on business policy, manufacturing policy. Unfortunately, that party has gone more progressive and they've pushed out more of their moderates, but there are still some moderates, still some people willing to have those conversations. And my hope is that whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, if we get people in office who are willing to have conversations about the need to make the state more business friendly, we could be in a much better spot. And so obviously, Fran, I'm with you. I'm pretty partisan, so I'd love to see my party do better at the ballot box. But failing that, at least getting people in office who are willing to have these types of conversations about how we can help working families if we actually start being really pro-business instead of just being pro-business when we issue press releases. Anybody else want to close with some positivity?
So Fran, you bring up the Contract with America. Back in the 90s, I was working for Phil Crane. And I have one of his original releases of the Contract with America with his Phil Crane stamp on it. So I still keep that from this to this day. So it's funny that you bring that up. I'm just hopeful that I'm sorry.
It really did happen.
No, it really did. And listen, I would love to have it. I would love to have both parties enter the center arena more. I'm not looking for, that will we get the majority and so forth, but I would like to have some more people kind of work together. As a legislator, was my reputation of trying to work across the aisle and so forth. We have seen craziness on both sides of the aisle. Your Republican right has gone farther right. Your progressive left has gone farther left. And I just hope that this is going to be the year that maybe we all start working together more. And I'm hopeful for that. And we'll see how it goes.
Well, our polling showed this state, it's not deep blue progressive, it's deep blue working class moderate. People self-describe themselves as moderate in this state, not as progressive or liberal or anything else. So this is a state where it's a working class state. We can come together and solve some problems. And that's what our people want. They don't want the political theater. They want leaders who are going to get things done. So here's hoping. Philippe, anything you want to close us out here? The last person to possibly bring some positivity. You're muted again.
I've lived here. I've lived in Illinois. I moved from California, and I guess it's been about 13 years now, and maybe 14 years. And one thing I've noticed about Illinois is that it, as hard as the climate is on business and for people on the right of center politically, it's that tough pressure creates diamonds. And I think the businesses in Illinois are some of the strongest and most agile, partly because they have overcome many of these challenges. and they're survivors. And so I feel, I've had a chance to meet many of these business owners, and every time one of them says, "Hey, we're not going anywhere. We might expand it somewhere else, but we're here in Illinois. We're sticking with it, and we're here to fight." That gives me a lot of reason for optimism. So it's great. It's still, there's a lot of reasons to do business here in Illinois, and so we'll fight for those people. And I think there's room to be optimistic about the economy in Illinois, despite some of the challenges.
I love it. Cool. Well, thank you all for your time. Again, we've got Lou Sandoval from the Chamber. For those of you who don't follow the Illinois Chamber, make sure you follow them. They're a force in Springfield and in this state. And I know Lou's got some exciting things coming up, so it's definitely worth keeping an eye on them. Ed Sullivan of EOSullivan Consulting does excellent work. Follow him. He's on social media, and he'll keep you up to date with what's happening in politics in Springfield. Philippe Melin of CALA, Citizens Against Lawsuit Abuse. They are out constantly in the news and throughout the state, so make sure you follow them. Fran Eaton from TMA, Technology Manufacturing Association, out of Schaumburg. They do some great work throughout the state of Illinois, and especially here in the Chicagoland area. And I know Fran keeps everybody informed of what's happening in the manufacturing world. Rich and I from Cor Strategies, we are all grateful for your time. Thank you to our producer, Lane Davis, for all the work he puts in. We'll catch you next week on our next episode of The Smoke-Filled Room. Thanks all.